Blackfathom Deeps is the first raid in Season of Discovery. Some of the bosses and mechanics in this raid is very interesting, and one boss in particular is giving people quite a bit of trouble. The interesting thing with Blackfathom Deeps is that this is actually the first time Blizzard has made classic style content, new classic style content. So this is really a view into how Blizzard is going to approach Classic Plus if it ever comes. So whether or not Blackfathom Deeps is a good raid or not is kind of a big deal. In my opinion, having raided Blackfathom Deeps for the first time today, I think it is absolutely amazing. I really do think that Blizzard has knocked it out of the park with this one. Although the difficulty is a bit all over the place, I would say that for the most part, Blackfathom Deeps is an amazing raid. There are some interesting quality of life improvements. Some things that I appreciate is that there's teleporters in the raid, so you don't have to walk from boss to boss if you don't want to. Like, you die, you come back to the raid portal, and hey, there's a guy that teleports you. There's also a guy that can repair your items in this raid, and really, I just think all of this is just a way to save people's time. Does it really add anything to have to march your guild out of the instance to go repair their items in the nearest vendor? I don't think it adds anything to the gameplay. So there's just these little quality of life things that are in Blackfathom Deeps. Unless I'm missing anything, it's just a objective improvement. Like, you know, you wipe on a boss, you want to get back into fighting that boss ASAP. You don't want to frou-frou around with repairing gear and walking through this giant cave. You just want to get back into trying the boss again. As for like the mechanics of the bosses themselves, I think they're very interesting. So going over some of the noteworthy bosses in this raid, there is Baron Aquanis. Now Baron Aquanis is quite interesting because it essentially takes the jumping puzzle, quote unquote, that we had in Blackfathom Deeps and makes it part of the raid encounter itself. This guy has a bunch of abilities that is going to put people in the water, and then they have to swim in this water and avoid some of these whirlpools pulling them down into the water. And there's some bubbles that increase your speed, so that's pretty damn cool. The fact that it's incorporating the stage and the water as part of the mechanics of the boss is actually quite creative. I know some people may not think this is vanilla style, and yeah, that is something that is quite subjective. I've heard some people hate this boss because it actually incorporates the stage itself into the mechanics, and that's not something that we really see in vanilla. One example comes to mind is in Naxxramas. You have Hygen the Unclean, and you have to do the Hygen dance and avoid, you know, the poison that comes out of the stage. I think that's the only thing that is kind of comparable to this. There's probably other examples that I'm not thinking of right now, but that's just what comes to mind. One other interesting boss in here is Gelihast. This is a Murloc boss. And the interesting thing with this boss is that there is like a bullet hell phase with this boss where there's a bunch of shadowy Murlocs and you have to like dodge out of their way. Very interesting. It's kind of like you're playing one of those bullet hell games that you get in like a Japanese arcade, but it's in WoW. Very interesting stuff. One of my favorite bosses in this raid is Lorgus Jett. Now the interesting thing with this guy is that he drops some totems on the floor and they do quite substantial things. One of these totems is basically this fiery boulder that chases a player and leaves a fiery trail that, you know, it's fire, and if you stand in the fire you take damage. And then there's like a Wind Fury totem which obviously increases his damage. And then there's also this thing called a Corrupted Lightning totem, and this thing is insane. Like, once that's up, if you attack Lorgus Jett, you take a substantial amount of damage reflected back to you. It's kind of a big deal to take out these totems ASAP. When I was playing on my rogue, I was just thinking totem duty. Just backstab these totems, which is kind of hard to tell what the back of a totem is. I mean, what is a totem? Does it even have a back? But anyway, I'm backstab spamming these totems, and that was the only thing in my mind, and that was my role in that fight. I really found this boss fun, especially with like the fiery trail that gets created as the fight progresses. You have to position yourself, and the tank has to worry about pulling the boss into a place where the melee can get at him without taking fire damage. I think it's a really great boss encounter. Now for context, I was doing a pickup group raid, and yeah, we wiped 2 times on this. Is that going to be the case as the WoW community gets more reps with this boss? I don't think so. I don't think a lot of the encounters in this raid is going to be too much of a challenge once we get to the end of this phase. But for now, it was a real cool encounter. You know, it wasn't a gimme fight. You had to pay attention to your surroundings, and the DPS had to be on the ball and taking out some of these totems that he spawns. I really liked it. Very fun fight. But the boss that is giving people a lot of trouble, or at least pickup groups, is Lord Gelihast. And this is something that actually requires a bit of mechanics and effort to be put into this fight for you to actually beat him. Unfortunately, I went into this fight without the add-on to see an enemy cost bar, and it turns out one of the main mechanics of this fight is interrupting his shadow spells. He casts Mind Blast, which is like a big deal, and you know, for a rogue, you really ought to kick it. However, considering this is my first time in this raid, I decided to go into it with basically no add-ons just to get the vanilla experience. But yeah, this guy does some insanely powerful shadow spells that can be interrupted until phase 2 starts. The interesting thing that he does is that he basically puts 2 party members to sleep. You essentially get put into like the shadow realm where you have to start killing these like yellow mobs. You need to kill them until a portal spawns, and then you can return to the real world and resume doing what you're doing against the boss. I think this is really freaking cool. You kind of have to play whack-a-mole with these ghosts until you create a portal, and in general, like, the amount of damage this guy is doing is just quite a lot. So much so that we actually bought shadow protection potions, which absorbs about 1,000 shadow damage, which is kind of necessary to beat this boss. Even when we were using the shadow protection potions, we actually wiped quite a few times. I believe we wiped like 5 times with our pickup group. I can certainly see how some people will have some problems fighting this guy. Phase 2 is when things go absolutely batshit insane and you can't interrupt his spells anymore. And this is where it really is a DPS race. You have to do a lot of damage if you want to beat this guy. I think this is the only boss in this raid where you can say, oh, you actually do need to be paying attention to beat this. You can't just, you know, face roll through it. So much so that even this raid that I was in was asking if anybody had those marbles that reduce the attack speed of the target, if they could use them on this fight, which I just think was kind of cute. We're level 25 and like we're really trying hard to beat this guy, and we're thinking about all the advantages we could get by using items and shadow protection potions and, you know, marbles. It really is cool that we have this experience at level 25. We even wiped on this boss with literally like 200 health remaining. So basically, if I got a backstab crit, we would have beaten this boss. Yeah, we had to get more reps in, and then finally we took this boss down, and I got my BIS chest piece, which I am absolutely thrilled about. However, what is weird is that the boss, like the final boss after this, is kind of a joke. Like, it really doesn't have that many mechanics that matter too much. From what I can gather with Aquanis, which is this Hydra, there isn't too much going on compared to Gelihast. Essentially, it's going to do this conal attack from one of its mouths, and you have to like dodge it, and you can also get applied with a debuff, but it turns out there are some actual water elementals surrounding this boss, which if you go near them, it will take off the debuff. Aside from that, I don't think there was really much to this fight, which is kind of strange. You'd think like the real test would be at the end, but no, it's the it's the second to last boss, which is the real test. I'm not sure if that was intentional by Blizzard or not, but I really hope they don't change Gelihast, because it was an absolute blast downing him. Maybe make Aquanis a bit more interesting, add a bit more difficulty or mechanics to it. I feel like Aquanis, considering it's the final boss, needs to have a bit more of a punch, but aside from that, I am absolutely thrilled with this raid. Rarely do I ever give props to Blizzard, so I'm not just one of these soy jack YouTubers that just says, oh, Blizzard is amazing, oh, look at this, wow. No, I actually think Blackfathom Deeps is a good raid. I had a real good time, and it does seem like Blizzard has its head in the right place when it comes to making new content in the classic style. I don't think they're missing the mark here. I think they have an idea of what the classic player base likes. The only boss that I can see being a bit controversial is Baron Aquanis, the first boss. I can see some people not liking that boss at all, because, you know, you're getting kicked into the water and you have to like, you know, dodge these whirlpools. I can see how that might be a bit too much for the classic player base. I think the highlights is Lorgus Jett, love that fight, and Lord Kelris. It was a test. It was a test. I actually had a nice sense of accomplishment when I took down him. So yeah, I'm real excited to see what Blizzard produces after this. If you want to see my initial experience playing Season of Discovery, you can check out the video on screen here.